Honourable members, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to meet again with this committee to present Chapter 6 of our 2018 annual report. Likewise, it's a pleasure to meet Commissioner Smith for the first time, and please allow me to wish him every success in leading this very important policy area within the Commission. This chapter provides our specific assessment for economic, social and territorial cohesion expenditure under MFF subheading 1B, and it covers funds managed both by DG Employment and Social Affairs and by Regional Policy, DG Regio. Having said this, let me highlight that the Court has no separate assessment and related error for the funds managed by DG Employment, that is ESF and EA, and indeed has not since the 2014 annual report. Therefore, unfortunately, it's unavoidable that there will be some overlap between my presentation today and that made at the Regional Policy hearing held here on the 11th of November. The objective of our audit was twofold, namely to contribute to our overall statement of assurance and secondly to assess the new control and assurance framework for the 14-20 period and the extent to which we may rely upon it. This new framework provides Member States audit authorities that they certify the residual error rate per operational programme is below 2%. Then subsequently the Commission accepts this expenditure in an annual closure procedure and concludes on the reported error rates. The ultimate aim of this new approach is to make increased use of the available regularity information and thus reduce the administrative burden on final beneficiaries. So in terms of the first objective, in terms of legality and regularity, for this year, we examined a representative sample of 220 transactions, of which 69, that is almost one-third, concerned DG Employment. Our testing consisted of transactions which the Member States' audit authorities had previously checked and involved a review of their checklists and the evidence they had to substantiate results of their audit work and opinions. We quantified 36 errors, 18 relating to ESF and EA, which the audit authorities had not detected. Taking into account the 60 errors the audit authorities had previously found, as well as Member States' corrections worth a total of €314 million covering both the policy areas and programming periods, we estimate the level of error for MFF subheading 1B to be 5%. This compares to 3% last year and 4.8% the previous year. To this end, I would like to recall that 2017 was an abnormal year. Only 17 Member States submitted a very low level of expenditure, and the proportion of ESF expenditure, which is by its nature is less complex, was higher than usual. This year, ineligible expenditure at project and beneficiary level, followed by infringement of internal market rules, which usually concern ERDF and CF expenditure, contributed most to our estimated level of error. We highlighted that EU and national rules remained complex and referred to simplified cost options as a potential simplification measure.
May I ask you to slow down a little bit? The interpretation has some problems.
The second objective of our 2018 SOA audit was to assess the new control and assurance framework for 14-20, covering the audit activities of both the Member States and the Commission. In terms of the second objective, which was the assessment of the work of the Member States audit authorities, this year we assessed the work of 15 out of 126 audit authorities. We continued to find that audit authorities issued clean opinions on regularity, that is, they certified a residual error rate below 2%, whereas we in fact found some to be above this materiality threshold. This was the case for 8 of the 15 assurance packages for the 14-20 period and 1 of the 9 closure packages for 7-13. DG Employment has also reported similar problems in its annual activity report, whereby 30%, that is 11 of 36 programmes, of the OPs that they considered at risk and audited on the spot were found to have erroneously reported an underestimated error rate, whereas they were actually above 2%. We also found a number of weaknesses concerning the work carried out by audit authorities. These concern their sampling, and despite improvements, there are still issues with the scope, quality and documentation of their work. We therefore had to re-perform 64 transactions compared to 121 last year, including 48 on the spot visits at beneficiary level, which was 80 such cases in the previous year. Whilst this shows an overall improvement, it still necessitated extra resources and resulted in an additional burden for some beneficiaries. If we now look at the assessment of the work carried out by the Commission, the results of the Commission's work are the basis for establishing the estimated error rates and the related reservations in the annual activity report. We reviewed the error rate for the 2016-17 accounting year, for which the underlying expenditure had already been subject to the new control cycle. The so-called worst case error rate of 2.3% was not yet final when DG Employment's annual activity report was published in June 2019. Possible corrective actions for 47 out of 141 OPs were still ongoing. And in fact, this error rate represents only a minimum error rate due to the Commission's methodology. Another important error rate for DG Employment is the risk at payment, which follows the financial regulations annuality principle and relates to relevant ESF-EA expenditure in 2018. As this expenditure has not yet been subject to the new control cycle, when the DG's annual activity report was published, the risk at payments figure of 2.1% is in fact a projection, which will be subject to future verification and potential corrections. Ladies and gentlemen, in view of the shortcomings of the new control and assurance framework outlined above, we cannot currently rely on the work of Member States' audit authorities or the error rates presented in DG Employment's annual activity report. We have made 3 recommendations that aim to improve the situation going forward, which the Commission has accepted, and we also referred to recommendations we made last year, which concerned issues that we found again. Dear members, while it is crucial to spend EU funds in compliance with the rules, it is vitally important in view of the scarce budgetary resources that there is a related positive impact in terms of objectives and results achieved. We assessed in a separate section of the chapter elements of the Member States' performance framework. We found that Member States do have monitoring systems to record information on performance, but in a number of cases, the authorities had not set result or output indicators at project level, and in a few cases, no indicators or targets have been set at all. Furthermore, we noted that completed projects have not always fully achieved their performance objectives. I hope that our findings, conclusions and recommendations will be of value for the work of this committee and of the Commission in relation to employment. The importance of this policy area is reflected by the fact that 13 special reports and 6 reviews dealing with cohesion matters have been published by the Court in 2018 and to date in 2019. Let me finish my presentation by stressing once again that errors that we identify are due to non-compliance with the relevant rules and conditions and are not necessarily wasted funds, as the project may still have achieved its objectives and indeed could have had a positive impact. I would like to thank the rapporteur, Ms Holmeyer, for the very useful exchange of views in relation to this discharge procedure, and also the Commission for the constructive working relationship throughout this difficult process. As you can imagine, it's not always easy, considering we operate in such a complex policy area, which often requires professional judgment. Finally, if I may, I would like to add a personal acknowledgement. This chapter benefited hugely from the valuable contribution of our esteemed colleague and friend Rares Rusanescu, the head of task for this audit, who passed away suddenly and unexpectedly 3 weeks ago. Not only have we lost an excellent auditor, but above all, a highly regarded and well-liked colleague. I now look forward to the presentation of Commissioner Schmidt and then to any questions that the honourable members may have. Thank you.